published its second annual Top 10 Under 40 issue earlier this year, highlighting the accomplishments of young security professionals across Canada. We are delighted to be joined today by 4 of those top 10 professionals. Brian Hamilton, System Engineer of the Healthcare Vertical at Omnigo. Asaf Levy, Director of Loss Prevention and Compliance at Metro Logistics. Jeff Hanna, Founder and Principal Consultant at JH & Associates. And last but not least, Terry Gobang, Director of Technology at WSP Canada Group. Thank you all so much for being here today. And just a reminder that we will be taking audience questions at the end of this panel. So to kick off today's panel, what were some of the biggest lessons learned in both your career and during this COVID-19 pandemic? Let's start off with you, Brian.
Right, I guess from a career perspective, I'll lean on some advice that I got from my dad years ago. He had told me, if you don't ask the question, the answer is always no. So being able to learn from your failures and that versus living with the regret of not trying something. As far as the pandemic, so many lessons. One of the things is just managing your time, because I think for a lot of us who didn't work remotely before, you could find it's really hard to just shut off. You could really just work all day if it's something that you're not used to. So being able to manage that, manage the family time. And the biggest thing was it was just a lesson in gratitude for me, because I realized through this time how blessed I am. A lot of people, for myself, when all this happened, I was still teaching at 2 colleges and doing my full-time job. So my workload increased, but a lot of people were out of work because of this pandemic. So being able to have that that career stability and having a wife who really held things down, taking care of our 4 kids, doing school for 3 of them while I was working like crazy, especially the first couple months. I'd say those were the biggest lessons throughout my career in the pandemic.
Jeff, anything you'd like to add to that? Oh, Jeff, I think you just need to unmute yourself.
I can't believe I was the first one to do that.
We had to break the ice somehow.
I'm glad your problem is that when you work from home, you want to work too much, because most people's problem is that when they work from home, all their stuff is here and they want to do everything other than work. But and that takes some discipline that you develop over time. I guess the biggest learning from my career progression has been not to be ruled by blind ambition. I think when you're interviewing for a job, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. Don't be blinded by slick titles, because you won't be as impressed with your business card if you really don't like the job. Make sure it's the substance of the role that's drawing you to it, and don't chase things that aren't going to give you that gratification if you know that it's not right for you.
Well, very well said, Jeff. Terry?
They're all really good, and I was gonna. Those were my choices, but I think some of the biggest lessons I've learned over my career is be true to yourself. We are individuals and we're people, and we show up every day to give it our best and give it our all. And sometimes we will receive bad advice, and it's important to know, is that advice worthwhile? Does it resonate with me? And do I want to take it? So I feel if we continue to honor who we are as an individual, do our best, show up every day, then we will be able to be successful. And if not that, at least happy, which is more important. Yeah. Over the pandemic has been a fascinating exposure into humanity with our colleagues, with ourselves, and with our industry networks. I found, and I've heard this before, but we can really only meet someone where that individual is at. And the pandemic in 2020 has been a bit volatile, so where we are at on a day or an hour can change drastically. So it's been a big lesson for me in the pandemic is stepping back, taking a breath, and paying attention. Where is the individual I am engaging with right now? Where are they at, and how can I best communicate with them?
Absolutely. And last but not least, Asaf?
Yeah, I have to agree with Brian. Having the balance between and a leader and a mentor told me it's not balanced work-life balance anymore. It's work-life intertwinement. Our work affects our home life, and our home life affects our work life, especially now during the COVID pandemic. A lot of us with children and different sort of childcare, and then our companies and how they're affected by that, and how they're helping professionals like ourselves really to make those worlds one rather than balance. And then stepping away from your laptop and going to read a story or bathe your children or do something, time spending away from work. And I have to say that I was a big fighter with my old boss, and I'd say to him, hey, why can't I work from home? I'd be more productive at home. Now I'm like, I can't wait to get to the office. I'll be way more productive in the office than I am at home. So it's about finding that fine-tuned piece between the work and home.
And I guess it's true what they say, be careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, what challenges did you all face over the course of your career, and what did you do to overcome them? Terry, do you want to kick us off with that question?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, gosh, being a woman in trades and in STEM, there have been many challenges. But nonsense aside, I think, some people will dislike, discredit, or dismiss you based only on your gender or your appearance alone. But like I mentioned before, our job is to continue showing up and giving it our best. It's also important to acknowledge that inclusion and equality begin with ourselves. So if we can lead by example, bring associates to the table, bring them to the meetings, introduce them, and ask them questions and make them be involved, will help overcome those hurdles that we are faced with. Also overcoming those challenges, we spend so much time learning about security and the industry and technology, but we also have to learn about business. So read a lot, read books on business, read books on innovation. The more we can learn, the better we will be able to respond.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you, Terry. Brian?
For myself, I guess a couple of the challenges that I had to overcome were, I guess I'll put it this way. A lot of times, because of the nature of what I do, I would find myself being either A, the only minority in the room, or B, the youngest person in the room, or sometimes both. And I think part of the challenge, what I will say, was myself, because I had to be sure not to let that be an excuse for not being successful. And one thing that my dad used to always say is he grew up in a time where things were a lot different. And he always said to me, you're going to have to work twice as hard as everybody else. So for me, it was always about just proving myself, being patient. I think patience is very important. And at the end of the day, you can't control how other people think or feel, but you can control how you present yourself, how you react to how people treat you. And, if you work hard enough, if you do a good enough job, people are going to have no choice but to be on board with what you bring to the table.
Asaf, you're next.
I would say some of the challenges that I'd overcome just in the industry is, especially starting off as a loss prevention floor walker, you'd see a lot of people don't really look at the ROI of the security department. We're always expenditure. So you would see, the shutdowns of the departments or the narrowing down of the departments and making the team smaller, but expecting more. And so one of those challenges that I had to overcome was, did I have to look for a new industry? Did I have to go into sales? I went to Apple and Dell to learn, something that's technology and moving forward, but I always found myself going back to the security elements of things. So the challenge was, do I stick with something that I love to do and that I know will always have a narrow margin and just become the best at it? Or do I change my whole career and do something that I can just get by to just make a dollar? And I really took that into mind and into consideration and really kind of evolved where I'm at. And here I am today celebrating with among some of the brightest people in our industry. And I just couldn't be happier with my choices that I overcame from the challenge.
See, always trust your gut. That's what I always firmly believe. And finally, Jeff, what are some challenges that you faced in your career and how did you overcome them?
So I guess I mean, sometimes you're your own worst enemy. I think when you experience success when you're young, there's a tendency to want to prove that you deserve your seat at the table. So we can come off as aggressive sometime and not as collaborative as we should be. I think you just have to take a breath, and you have to have faith that, you know, if you're in a position where you've got some responsibility, you're there because somebody thought you were ready, and be positive and collaborative, and get yourself under control.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And something that I really love about this group today is that you all really do come from different backgrounds and different sectors of security. And so I just really would love to hear about what you all love about your sector of security and that whole industry. So why don't we start off with you, Jeff?
Yeah, I guess consulting is interesting because you kind of, you know, you find yourself in somebody else's business. They have a particular need that they need a skill set to fill that they don't have in-house. There's a need to get your head around what their business is and what their needs are really quickly, meet their need, and then you kind of move on. And it's neat because it's there's always new challenges. The one thing the drawback is you don't get to really invest yourself in something long term and build something, but you do get to get a lot of satisfaction at helping people quickly solve problems and helping their business, and I enjoy that.
And was it challenging starting your own business?
Yeah, it can be. The hardest part is letting go of the side of the pool and giving it a try. But sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm glad it worked because I enjoy running my own business. I would encourage everybody to try it at least once. The best part about it is you'll never be afraid of being unemployed ever again, because you know you can rely on yourself, and that's valuable.
And Terry, what do you like the most about working in the security industry?
It's ever evolving, and be it from threats or technology. In the consulting space, we need to stay on ahead of that. We need to be the expert in that field. You never stop learning. And there comes especially where we are now in the, I guess we're the fourth industrial revolution, with technology and innovation. There's a great responsibility in upholding higher standards and quality and privacy, which I feel oftentimes is overlooked or thought of a little bit too late. So it's important that we are having those tough conversations with our people and our clients, so we can get ahead of that. But that's what I love about this, is it's never stagnant, it's never boring, and there's always something new to learn. Once you think you've mastered something, you realize it's changed.
And Asaf, what do you like the most about it?
Well, my industry, where I'm at, it's like every piece of security all put together. So I could be the consultant, and I could be the guard, and I could be the floor walker, the investigator, the interviewer. We, as a 3PL, touch every business, from company names such as Zara to any LP that's out there, and by LP I mean licensed producer involved with cannabis. So things like that, car parts, Mercedes and Honda. I'm everywhere. I get to see all those pieces and elements in every piece of business, but very different in respect to Jeff. I get to see those things all the way through. I get to communicate with them right to the end and see my projects, what developed from them into what they've become and how they're evolving. And it's not just security. It's how do we improve? How do we do continuous improvement within our business and have security and a loss prevention mind state there? And that is, for me, it's just the best overall around security personnel that you can be is involved in 3PL.
Absolutely, and there's a ton of moving parts, it seems like, with your role.
Oh, absolutely. If from the implementation of just, hey, this is what security SOPs that we need to, hey, we got to launch a building and we got to put access controls up and cameras up, and I'm designing those systems. So I'm sitting there, I've gone to the part so granular of walking through with the techs and saying to them, hey, what's a dip switch and how do I connect this and what are the inputs to get my reader to, it's everything. So I'm actually just training somebody and she looked at me and she said, how are you doing all this? And you're keeping it all in line. And I'm like, I don't know, I just do it.
And finally, Brian, what do you like the most about working in security?
I guess for me, because I spent most of my time in the healthcare space, it's being able to make a difference. When you think about it, not too many people actually really want to come to a hospital. Usually, if somebody wants to come to a hospital, it's because they're having a baby. And even those situations can go sideways. You see people lose children. And then my mom has this saying, mama's baby, papa's maybe. Sometimes people find out at the hospital that the baby that's being born isn't their child. So that can create some unique challenges as well. So there's all sorts of different things that happen in healthcare that keep it interesting. It's different every day. We've seen that especially throughout this pandemic. Things are changing all the time. It's just, the excitement that comes with that. But it's really being able to make a difference, have a positive impact on somebody's day, because it can really, when I was working as a frontline guard, sometimes I would get the feedback that, the brief communication that I had with somebody that I thought nothing of really made a difference for them. So those are kind of the things that I've always looked forward to being in the healthcare space.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, I'm sure there has not been a boring day since this pandemic began for you.
No, there really hasn't been a boring day. That's very true. Whether it's the work stuff or the home stuff, it's been interesting, really adjusting to all the changes.
And so as you all work through COVID-19, what were some of the biggest or most surprising things that you learned about yourself or even working with your colleagues? Jeff, do you want to start that off?
I've worked at home for a long time, so it wasn't a huge change for me, but I can speak to what it was like to getting used to working at home. And I think the best advice I can give anybody is develop routines, and from routines come discipline. Like I knew a guy who told me that when he got up in the morning, he had to put on a suit, walk around the block, and by the time he got back to his house, he was in work mode. And if putting on a collared shirt is what it takes for you to be able to be in work mode, learn that about yourself and cater to it and get yourself into those routines, and that's where the discipline is going to come from, and that's the trick to working at home.
Terry, any thoughts on that?
Routine is important. Getting outside is important, and remembering that mobile phones aren't attached to the house. I take a lot of walking conference calls, but I think one of the biggest things that I realized, most surprising, is that industry talks about resilience. Resilience. It almost becomes diluted in a sense. But what I've witnessed most throughout the pandemic has been perseverance. So I think the next step for us is to take that perseverance and turn it into resiliency, because resiliency is not about pushing through and burning out and stressing ourselves out. It's about having that capacity and that flexibility and the resources to continue without missing a beat.
And Brian?
For myself, I'd actually piggyback a lot of what Jeff and Terry have both said. Talking about routine, I take a different approach than Jeff. I actually, once I started working remotely, I packed up all of my suits other than like 3 of them, and I went to Sivu Play Sports and bought every single Raptors hoodie that I could get my hands on. So I've taken a different approach to how I dress for work now. But as far as just being adaptable, Terry touched on resilience. Is very important. How we're leveraging the technology as well. Like we've had all of this technology. When you look at GoToMeeting, Zoom, all these different things that we just weren't really using to their fullest capabilities, and just I think a lot of it was people were really resistant to get away from that in-person meeting format. But we're seeing that it works, and I think that's been a positive change. I never thought I would. One thing I could say I never thought about myself is, as much as I'm a people person, I am actually really enjoying spending a lot of time by myself. Social distancing is kind of my jam, I'm learning. So that's something I've learned about myself.
See, there's some people who really are thriving in this social distancing environment and some who aren't. There's no in between. And finally, Asaf, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the best things that I've learned is how much time I can actually dedicate outside of work to improve what I'm putting for my business and for my career. So just completing, for example, a cybersecurity program at York University was some of the things of the accomplishments I was able to do with being extra time at home. And I can kind of multitask and manage homeschooling, because a lot of the universities were doing school from home. Doing extra work with ASIS or TAPA, and doing those go-to conferences and webinars with those guys, and just expanding that knowledge. So I'm really impressed with my, prioritization, and as well as kind of helping my career launch even further.
And, you all were our top 10 under 40 winners this year, which is a huge accomplishment. And so looking back on your careers and, the next wave of our top 10 under 40 winners, what advice do you have for anyone who is starting out in the security industry? Asaf, do you want to share some wisdoms there?
Yeah, I have to say my number one regret, and I never regret things in life, so I have to say just one thing I wish I did from the beginning was really get involved in the community. I think I missed that. It's never too late, and I'm glad I'm part of this community. I became an ASIS member, as I said, became a member of TAPA, and started networking. And, LinkedIn was a huge one. I got to meet many people through this top 10 award, and just communicating. I have to say, just network. It's remarkable the amount of information and knowledge you can gain from so many people from a wide spectrum of the security field, and even going, there's security there? And they're like, yep. And then you're, okay, cool, let's figure that out. So I have to say, if there's the one thing, network.
Absolutely. It's about who you know these days. And Jeff, any parting wisdoms?
Yeah, I guess educate yourself. Like, security, if it's done right, is an academic exercise. So the process of measuring and responding to risk, everybody does that naturally. You walk into a room, you think, am I safe here? What can go wrong? But quantifying and qualifying how you build your security program is how you make it defensible. So systematizing that is part of that academic exercise that you can't do unless you're educating yourself in those systems, and there's lots and lots of resources.
And Brian?
Yeah, for myself, I'll echo again a lot of what's been said already, but networking, just building those relationships is really important. And just to give a little bit of context there, the last few years I've had a lot of career progression, and that's involved switching employers. Even most recently coming to Omnigo from GardaWorld, who happens to be one of the sponsors. I haven't applied for any of these jobs. People have reached out to me. That's just from building a strong network. So that's important. I'll say another strong tip that I want to give out is find a mentor, and secondly, be a mentor. And just kind of get outside of your head if you don't think that you have the ability to be a mentor. There's always somebody who can learn something from you. And those are some of the best teaching opportunities and learning opportunities that you have. There's the old adage that if you teach something, you learn it twice. So you're always learning when you're teaching somebody else as well. And I'll steal some advice that I received at one of these Canadian security events a few years back from Bob Moore, who I haven't actually met. He actually is with another one of the sponsors, Axis. And sorry, I couldn't plug Everbridge, but some of you see what I just did there. But anyways, Bob Moore gave the advice to become good at public speaking. And this is something that I was really, really terrible at a few years ago. So I took that to heart, spent a lot of time really developing that skill. And all that to say, just develop your transferable skills as well, because you don't know where your career is going to go. And lastly, just being respectful of the time here, I'll keep this really quick, but Jim Rohn was the one who said you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So surround yourself with good people, surround yourself with people who can give you constructive feedback. In my life, I had my mom who thought everything I did was great. If I brought her the same picture from kindergarten and gave it to her, she would still put it on the fridge today. And I had my dad who was kind of the opposite. He would find holes in everything I did. I remember bringing home a 95 on my report card, and he said, if you weren't lazy, you would have gotten 100. So you want to find somebody in between that, someone who can really give you good feedback and help you grow as a person.
Exactly. You want that kind of honesty in your life, of course. And finally, Terry.
Yeah, advice for anyone starting out: get involved, but more than getting involved, more than showing up at luncheons and events and networking, volunteer, be active, be a contributor. Yeah, it sucks at first, it really does, and then once you get through it, you meet those people, they become your network, they become your friends and your allies. That is so important. So volunteer. You will never regret volunteering. And then through volunteering, we learn more about ourselves. We learn more about what we need and what we want to aspire. So ask for that. Don't be afraid to ask, even if it feels too far-fetched. Because if you don't ask, it's a no. If you ask, then you can have that conversation and either get a yes or find a common ground. But more importantly, above everything else, hold true to yourself. The world needs you to show up as the best version of you. So be you.
That was really wonderfully said from all four of you. Thank you so much. And I feel like I could talk with you guys all day, but since we don't have that luxury, I'm just going to very quickly go into an audience question that just came in. What do the panelists think is most important? Education, training, reading, and or strong membership? Brian, do you want to tackle that one for us?
Yes, I'll say the answer is yes. They're all important. If I'm to prioritize one over another, I guess education in the different forms. So not necessarily your conventional education of just going to school. That's important as well. But you just want to find ways to educate yourself. So, there's books. There's one of my friends uses the term YouTube University. You can learn almost anything you want to know online now for free. So take advantage of those resources. And mentorship too, something I touched on earlier, which is also something that I feel is really important.
And Asaf, do you want to add to that?
I have to agree completely with Brian. It's all of that, and if you were to pick one, it's that unconventional education. Go through mentorship. Jeff and I had the opportunity to sit down and do big projects together, and the amount of information that I learned from him is absolutely phenomenal. I reached out to him in the beginning of that, and it really escalated my knowledge about what I needed. And it's because of that kind of connection and mentorship. So education in a very not like, hey, I need a piece of paper up on my wall. Not to say it's not important and not good, but you get so much more from being in the actual environment.
And Terry?
It's a balance. It's going to be a balance for each individual learning style. I believe it's a mix of all three or four. When we have mentors, remember, fact check. We got to make sure the information we're receiving is accurate.
Oh yeah, especially in today, right? Like, because there's a lot of different sources that are coming out with news, so you just always have to make sure, is what I'm hearing correct or accurate? And finally, Jeff.
I would say education is very important, but find a way to connect it to the practical aspects of what you do for a living. Like anybody can rattle off what they read in a textbook, but unless you can really interpret it and apply it to what you do, that's, in my opinion, the key to success. So that's what my advice would be.
So it really feels like it's kind of like a sprinkling of all of these things are important. They all kind of have to be evenly distributed. Is that the general consensus I'm getting from everybody?
I would say, yeah, for sure.
I think so, and I think it changes over time too. Certain things at certain periods of your life are going to be more important than others, so you have to kind of prioritize as your life evolves.
Absolutely, and yeah, and I obviously, for going back to the piece about networking and getting involved with industry organizations like ASIS and CANASA and things like that. There's a big benefit to that in terms of networking, but also just learning from other people and going to I mean, pre-pandemic, when you could go to events and actually meet the people, and instead of it being a virtual screen.
Oh, absolutely. Even in my cybersecurity program, I was able to meet the president of the IS2 chapter in Toronto, and we're having those virtual meetings and speaking with all those people. It's outside of the real physical security world, but you're connecting, you're making those networks.
Yeah, and just to piggyback what Asaf has said, yeah, it's relationships and resources. Those are the two biggest benefits out of being involved with any of these industry associations.
And does anyone have any other final thoughts or comments or anything that I've been asked that you would like to talk about today?
Don't underestimate the value of networking. Security is a bolt-on. It's a complementary function to other primary businesses for the most part. Like if I have a question about logistics security, Asaf's my logistics guy. He's a security professional, but he's in the logistics business, and he knows his business and he applies security principles to it. Having a network of people who can have those specializations can really come in handy. So develop that.
Absolutely. This is an industry where you can be shy.
I would say, don't be afraid of anything that comes at you. The person that I hired at Metro Logistics to join the loss prevention team came from retail, and she says to me, "Oh my God, it's supply chain. It's completely different." And so I told her, embrace that fear and take the bull by the horn and really drive that. And you have a whole new perspective that I may have fishbowled myself into. So you're coming out of an ocean and I'm in this little aquarium. So how can you make me open my eyes and expand my knowledge? Because you're coming from something that I haven't been in a while. So grab it, ride it, take it all the way.
Absolutely. And anyone have anything else to add?
I think these two have kind of mic drop that answer, but I'll just add that's something that's relevant right now. Just make sure that you're taking care of your mental health. Your colleagues, check in on them, because a lot of people are still adjusting to this whole new workspace that we're in. Not everybody's like myself and can just be by themselves for months on end and not feel any ways about it. So just, check in on your colleagues and do some self check-ins as well. Self-awareness is really important.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. We really appreciate your insights into your career growth and everything that you've learned during this very challenging time that we're all still going through. So now it's time for our 15-minute